Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And as usual, we'll start all meetings by asking if I'm audible and visible. So this is my slides, and I hope it is visible. Right. So thank you very much for the organizers for calling me for this talk. In the next 10 minutes or so, I will be talking about the newer developments in the therapeutic game plan and managing HCC. When we talk of HCC, we look at the first line management and then we look at the second line management. The first line management, where the pretenders to the throne right now are probably the atezolizumab, bevacizumab, based on the pretty impressive results from the IMBRAVE 150, the lenvatinib based on the Reflect 304, and then hot off the presses, we have the Himalaya trial reported just 3 days back, the Durva tremelimumab, and the cabozantinib atezo trial represented from the Cosmic 3-1 are still about to come, are the LEAP 002, the lenvatinib pembro, and the EP Nivo checkmate 9DW. So this is the Reflect study. Now remember, all these studies, you will find certain things common. Most importantly, in the first line, they have used BCLC B and C. Almost all are confined to childhood A. That is something we need to remember. Most of these patients would have certain inclusions and exclusions. For example, the lenvatinib excluded patients with more than 50% liver, a clear bile duct invasion, or portal vein invasion at the main portal vein. So the really bad subset was kind of not seen with the lenvatinib group. Look at the primary endpoint, it was an overall survival. When we go to the next paper, that was the IMBRAVE. Now, IMBRAVE 150 was a phase 3 trial, atezo-bev versus sorafenib. They used mostly all patients, did not have too many exclusions, apart from this part. Patients with risk of bleeding or with high risk of bleeding, including untreated varices. Use atezo-bev. Again, the other arm is sorafenib. Co-primary endpoints, as in most atezo arms, most atezo trials are using this co-primary endpoint. So they use OS and PFS in a hierarchical system. When you looked at the Himalaya, now the Himalaya study is an interesting study. They actually used 4 different regimens. It was a 4-arm study. Included BCLC B and C, only childhood A. Again, no MPV thrombosis, extravascular invasion, extrahepatic or macrovascular invasion could be seen. They had 4 arms. The tremelimumab was given in a 300 mg straight 1 dose with durvalumab, or used as 75 weekly for 4 weeks with durvalumab. The first protocol is called the STRIDE protocol. So the STRIDE versus this versus sorafenib versus durvalumab. Look at the primary objective, OS for this STRIDE versus sorafenib. Secondary, Durva versus sorafenib. Now, the interesting thing which we need to remember, again, it was a kind of a hierarchical testing one after the other. Almost all of these trials do not compare these 2 arms. So, you do not have a comparison of tremelimumab with durvalumab versus durvalumab. That's something that I would have looked forward to, that are you adding anything beyond your durvalumab? And that somehow no study is really looking at it. That's how the studies have been designed. Look at the Cosmic 312. Now, the Cosmic 312, again, more or less similar kind of inclusion criteria. They looked at cabo with atezo versus sorafenib versus cabozantinib. Again, endpoints, PFS, OS of the combination versus sorafenib or single agent versus sorafenib. There is no arm comparing cabo with atezo versus cabozantinib. These are all, kind of the way they're looking at things. I'm not too sure that's what, as a person practicing India, I would really want to see. I would want to know whether there's an extra benefit or not, but be as it may, that's how it is. So I've just made a table trying to summarize what we have seen across 4 studies.
So Vamshi, the moment you started describing the table, it went disappeared. You can leave it.
I'm connected to the hospital net. Anyways, so what I was talking about were the different studies, all of which are versus sorafenib. And when you look at the number of patients, all are pretty good. The primary endpoints almost similar. Looking at the PFS, the lenvatinib has a doubling of PFS, significant here. The atezo-bev has 2.5 months. Look at the Himalaya study. The Durva trem actually did not have a PFS advantage, both for the Durva tremi as well as for the Durva and sorafenib arm. There is no OPFS benefit, but the endpoint here is actually overall survival. When you look at the cabo-atezo, again it matches. Everywhere the sorafenib arm is performing as expected. Look at the overall survival now. The lenvatinib was a non-inferiority study and it was statistically non-significant. So there's no overall survival benefit here. Look at the atezo-bev, which has a significant improvement. Again, I have not found an update in this to find out what is the actual final median overall survival. That has I have not found that. The durva-tremi benefit of around 2.5 months. The cabo-atezo, no overall survival benefit. Remember, the endpoint included in OS, but it is not yet seen. ORR everywhere is kind of similar except the last arm. The toxicity, again, everywhere similar. Definitely, sorafenib is slightly lesser, but it's not that the combination arms are less significant. So for me, when I compare these four arms, the one which is showing me both the PFS and an overall survival benefit is probably the atezo-bev. I would still put it as the number one at this point. Lenvatinib was not designed to show you a superiority, so it still works quite well. Durva-tremi, for me, while the OS benefit is good, looking at this PFS, slightly a bit of a downer. Cabo-atezo, no overall survival benefit, though that was one of their endpoints. So I think this still needs some doing. Interesting for me has been this cabo versus sorafenib up front. 5.8 versus 4.3, no benefit. Remember, cabozantinib is approved in the first line, in the second line, but one of the few trials is actually seen in the first line. Again, primary endpoint of OS. Leap over to first line lenva pembro versus the only lenvatinib. Again, something that will be interesting to look at. So I'm just switching off my video because it looks some internet issue. Then comes the next thing on the second line. So when you look at the first line, you have cabozantinib and ramucirumab and regorafenib included and approved based on studies. Not going to details on that. The IO drugs in the second line. Checkmate 040 showed some positive benefit. However, this study has then subsequently not shown overall survival benefit and has been withdrawn by the company. So when you look at that withdrawal, okay, that study is not there. So when you look at the pembrolizumab, you had 224 trial which showed some overall survival. Then the second line keynote 240, which failed to show an overall survival benefit. The keynote 390 has shown a benefit only for Asian patients. So after all of that, the FDA has as of now continued its approval for Keytruda but has withdrawn the approval for Opdivo. So that's where we are in the second line. The Celestial study is the one which has shown a benefit for Cabo in the OS and the PFS. So this is what is reflected in the NCCN. Atezo-bev is the preferred regimen, though lenvatinib continues to be a category 1 for along with sorafenib. Subsequent second line, immuno has moved out of the first line, first option. So you have Regora, Cabo, Ramu, lenvatinib and sorafenib. Other recommended regimens could be a Nivo EP and Pembro, though remember the Pembro has now got a category 2B. So if you want to use an immunotherapy in HCC, as of today, it's still the first line. Second line, no benefit of immunotherapy, you might as well use one of the other medicines. So to summarize, first line atezo-bev, if no other contraindications. If there are contraindications, probably lenvatinib is to be preferred. Second line, if you have not used nivolumab and ipilimumab, may be a combination. Otherwise, use the regorafenib, cabozantinib, ramucirumab. For all its causes, I am not really pushing. Other TKIs like sunitinib and all come into this picture. Otherwise, you have the MSI tumor agnostic agents, and that's the. So, thank you very much, and over to the organizers.